Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPhone 3GS and see how this particular iPhone holds up in 2024. Now, the first thing I would definitely tell you is I would not recommend a single person to go through and buy the iPhone 3GS anymore. It doesn't make any sense to go and purchase an iPhone like this. There's so many better iPhones that you can actually purchase. And if I'm going to go through and buy a particular iPhone, like I said before, this one just doesn't really make a lot of sense to go and buy. But there are definitely a lot of iPhones I'd recommend a lot of people to buy on top of this. So if you want to go and pick up some iPhones that I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same exact time. Now, starting off with the outside of the iPhone 3GS, one of the biggest things to keep in mind with this particular iPhone was that this was basically the first S series of iPhone that we actually brought. And although this wasn't like a really big change from the way this particular iPhone looked or anything like that, this was still a very big improvement in so many other areas of these particular iPhones. So for one, the exterior pretty much still looks about the same as the iPhone 3G, and this iPhone came out in 2009, which was like 15 years ago as of this point, which was absolutely insane. For this iPhone to be this old, and for it to still kind of like look pretty decent, and for it to even turn on is actually pretty crazy. On the front of it, you're getting this 3.5-inch TFT panel on it, and it definitely was a dated looking panel. Thick bezels on the top and bottom. When you're looking at this iPhone and comparing it to the latest generation, it is pretty crazy how good of an iPhone this thing looks without a doubt. No front-facing camera on here. On the bottom, headphone jack as well as a 30-pin connector. So the older styling of, USB port that you were getting here, which again, in and of itself, was another very crazy thing going on here. But this was, of an iPhone that came out so long ago that at this point, it doesn't even really matter anymore because a lot of people are not even using this iPhone when it comes down to it. On the backside, you're getting this kind of like reflective material on the back, which I generally thought looked pretty good at the time. It was a very good premium feeling iPhone and a very good feeling phone at that moment. You would not believe that at that moment, a lot of people would look at this particular iPhone as it being one of the top tier best phones that you could basically buy. And for it to kind of look like this thing at that moment and for it to perform at this level was actually very, very interesting in and of itself. Although I wouldn't recommend people to buy this iPhone anymore, that in and of itself was another very crazy thing going on for this particular phone when it came down to it. Now on top of that, when it came down to the camera, you're getting a very, very basic, like a 3.15 megapixel camera on this thing, 480p, very, very average type of camera, a very average type of lens that you were getting on this thing too. So if you're going to go through and use this phone, you were getting video capability, which is really cool, but only 480p. There are so many better things that you could do besides having a 480p camera. The front camera of like the iPhone 6 was better than this thing. So that kind of just puts things in perspective. Like 5 years later, you were getting so much better cameras. And now 15 years later, you're getting very good cameras inside of your particular iPhone. So for this thing, very limited type of lens, and it probably could be one of the more lackluster things going on for this particular iPhone when it comes down to it. Now on top of that, but back in the day, it was like totally fine. So just keep that in mind. But nowadays you can tell it's definitely kind of showing its age. On top of that, the software wise, this thing stopped getting software support on iOS 6.1.6. So that was many, many years ago. So if you're going through and getting an iPhone like this now, clearly this thing from a software perspective is not going to be giving you that great of an experience. It's going to be very limited. You're not going to be getting any more software updates in and of itself. So that could be one of the bigger problems going through if you're trying to go and buy this phone as of this point. You're going to be getting, once again, kind of a limited type of experience when it comes down to it. Although it's pretty sad, it's just one of those things to kind of keep in mind. But you were still getting a very good phone inside of the ones that are currently supported, so just gotta keep that in mind. But the performance of this iPhone was another crazy thing. This thing was giving you a 600 megahertz Cortex-A chipset with 256 megabytes of RAM. And back then, that was a very good performing iPhone. This was at the time the best performing iPhone you could buy, but clearly nowadays, this thing just isn't really that great. And more than even the performance, the thing that's going to be limiting you the most is probably the lack of software update applications that are available. There are like no applications available to actually download on these particular iPhones. In fact, even the iPhone 6s is probably going to start having problems finding applications and updates in the future. This iPhone in and of itself is probably DOA, it's dead on arrival. And that's kind of the problem when you're getting this particular iPhone. Even the battery life, at the time was good, but nowadays just really isn't that doing that great either. And when I look at this particular iPhone as at this point, I'm just kind of looking at it and I'm just like, there just really isn't that big of a reason to go ahead and buy an iPhone like this at all, unless you're buying it as a collector's item. If you're buying it as a collector's item, it makes a lot more sense to go and pick up an iPhone like this. But for every single other person, I would not recommend going through and buying an iPhone like this as of this point. I would recommend sticking with an iPhone that's still supported with software like an iPhone XR, XS, or XS Max or newer. But I do like the legacy of the 3GS. I think Apple did a good job and a great job with this iPhone when it first came out, But keep in mind, I probably would not recommend people to buy this iPhone when it comes down to it. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there for the most part. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.